I want to start off by telling you guys a little story. When I was 16 years old, I got myself this brand new navy blue slider phone. And the first thing that you do in 2007 when you get a new phone is you customize your ringtone, or at least that was the first thing that I always did. So one night, I was sitting with a friend, and we were scrolling through my iTunes whenever I came across a song that I'd heard before, and that was Cheater by Michael Jackson. And as I was listening to it, I thought, yes, this song is perfect. So I turned to my friend and I said, yes, this song is perfect. It's orange, it matches my blue phone perfectly. And confused, he said, wait, what do you mean it matches? And I honestly thought that he didn't understand complementary colors. So I began explaining to him that blue was on the opposite side of the color wheel to orange, meaning that they were complementary, and that meant that they looked nice together. And he instantly corrected me, saying, yeah, no, I get that, but what do you mean the song is orange? And in the moment, I knew that something was off, but I honestly had no idea it had anything to do with me. How could someone not be seeing music as color? So I turned to my friends and family saying, hey, you guys see music as color too, right? And literally no one else did. Everyone was confused, I was super confused, and I honestly felt very, very alone. But fortunately, around that time, I was getting interested in neuroscience and psychology, and I happened to stumble into what was an explanation for what I was experiencing. And that was a neurological condition called synesthesia. So in synesthesia, your brain is essentially cross-wired, where one sensory or cognitive pathway leads to the automatic and involuntary response and another sensory or cognitive pathway. And this can manifest itself in many forms, from maybe tasting words to assigning personalities to different letters. And soon I found out that I actually had 3 variations. So the first is one of the most common varieties, and that is called Grapheme-Color Synesthesia. And in this form, every letter and every number that I experience essentially has a color code. So, for example, my M is always magenta, which is great because my name is Melissa McCracken and I love magenta. My A is always light blue, and my 3 is always lime green. And this happens every time I read a book, every time I look at a sign, and every time I calculate a math formula, which is pretty much never anymore. My second form is called Spatial sequence synesthesia. And through this, anything that is presented in a sequential format, such as your numbers or your days of the week or your months of the year, exist in a particular point in space around my body. So if I were to count from 1 to 100, I might start right here with 1, and it'll trail its way up to 100 over here. Or if I were to meet you on a Tuesday, I might imagine that meeting happening about here because I always experience Tuesday here. And lastly, I have chromesthesia, or music to color synesthesia. And this is the form that presented itself as I was trying to choose my ringtone. And through this, I experienced music as this flow of color and texture kind of shifting around as the song progresses, or it might change completely as a new instrument is introduced, or as a chord is produced. And all of these variations are very clear and concise and automatic and completely involuntary. And to be clear, they are not hallucinations. I can drive and listen to music, which is a question that I'm asked fairly frequently. It in no way inhibits my actual visual field. And the best comparison I have for that is the way in which you might recall a memory. So for example, if you have a memory happening and you are envisioning it as you're driving your car, you're not going to freak out thinking, oh my gosh, I can't think of this anymore, I can't see the road, I'm going to crash my car. It might just exist in this filter that is sort of floating above your head or wherever you may normally visualize a memory. So after learning how differently I was, I also learned how frequently I had to describe these differences to everyone else. And honestly, it didn't really make sense for me to describe them. After all, I was verbalizing a visual. So being an artist at heart, I thought, okay, I'm going to paint this. I'm going to show these depictions to people. So I'm going to show you these, and we have one up here right now. But before I get into it, I need to explain to you how I actually show music in a tangible form. And I do this by taking the 3 to 4 minutes that I see flowing along and bringing it into a concise two-dimensional image by incorporating the elements that I feel are most imperative and most important in representing the song as a whole. So the first one here that I have up is called Little Wing by Jimi Hendrix, and you guys might be familiar with this one. And this one's very, very near and dear to me because it's honestly one of my first memories of synesthesia and also one of my first paintings of synesthesia. So when I was little, my brother used to practice playing the guitar, and I would sit and listen to him. But as I was listening, I didn't really pay attention to my environment, but instead, I would pay attention to the colors that I was seeing in the room. And that was these swirls of white and pink and blue, and they would all kind of develop together and move as the song progressed, but alongside his guitar notes, that added these strikes of gold and yellow. So next, I have a song called True Love Waits, and this song is by Radiohead. And if you guys are familiar with this song, it's kind of a somber, tranquil song which creates these white and kind of blue backgrounds. But it has this bouncing ball sound, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. I wish I could play it for you. But it creates those clumps of blue and purple there. But as they sit throughout the song, they kind of dissipate out in white. Next, this is a little bit different, and it's more focused on the voice of the singer. And this is a Lauryn Hill song called X Factor. And her voice to me is very warm, which creates these pink and brown kind of tones that swoop up through to the right. But she also has this attitude and this style, and that creates that extra little flare of white on the side. Next, this is a song called Lenny by Stevie Ray Vaughan. And I was really wanting to focus on the first few notes of that song. And it's just a few guitar notes, and they play out in this reverberating way, which is very full and dynamic, which creates all the colors. But as they reverberate out, they kind of spin around in this circular motion, which creates all the movement in the background there. And last, I have a song that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, and that is Bach's Cello Suite No. 1. And the cello, to me, can only be represented by these deep and saturated jewel tones. So this is mostly made of those tones, but the first few notes of that song kind of sit in this crested and nested kind of way, and that's what creates the curve dynamic in this picture. So as I made these paintings, they were kind of my babies, and I was really protective over them, and I didn't want to share them with the world. But as I showed them to my friends and family, they gave me the confidence to then move it to a more global scale. And it's kind of crazy how we can do that so easily with the internet. So I shared my work with sites like Imgur and Board Panda, and as they gained more traction and circulation on those sites, they made their way to places like CNN and MTV and O Magazine. And not only did this allow me to turn my hobby and my condition into a full-time career, but it also allowed me to see these unfiltered responses from people around the world. And some of these responses were people saying, "Oh, this is exciting. This is something that I've never experienced before. Thank you for sharing." Or sometimes people were a little skeptical, thinking that there was no way that synesthesia could exist. But my favorite responses were the ones from people who also had synesthesia. And a few of them would be excited because they thought, yes, these are the visuals that I've experienced before. I finally get to see them in a somewhat tangible way. But there were also these people who had synesthesia, and they had no idea that this was somewhat of a normal occurrence. They thought that they were completely alone, and they almost thought that as being a defective sort of experience to go through, that something was wrong with them. So when they saw my paintings, they thought, oh my gosh, I'm not alone, and nothing is wrong with me. And that was my favorite one of all. So as I went through all of this, from learning how I was different, to sharing it with the world, to turning it into a full-time career, I realized a lot of things. And one in particular is that from day one, we live our lives through one perspective, our own. Everything we encounter is filtered through this lens of our personal experiences, our relationships, our developed and adapted beliefs, our natural skills and shortcomings, and any other nuances that are specific to who we are as individuals. And as these dynamics kind of embed themselves into our lives' experiences, it makes it difficult to imagine a world in ways that we have not directly experienced. And of course, this can be a huge problem. Not only does it affect our ability to empathize, but it also removes us from an accurate assessment of who we are as unique individuals. So I would like for you guys to take the time to please explore who you are and share that with the world, because you 100% are way more unique than you imagine. You have thoughts and ideas floating through your mind that, although they seem very, very normal to you because you experience them day in and day out, they could be absolutely remarkable to the rest of the world and necessary for the rest of the world to hear. So share this with the world, because you have no idea if you might turn it into a career or use it as a tool for education or somewhere bring solace and relief to someone that feels alone. Thank you.